There isn't a single metal nail in this house. Every joint is a confession in wood. But this confession was paid for by an empire built on lies, on 99 and 44/100% pure lies. First, there was the soap that floated, a factory defect that was called a miracle. Then they took a dark, inedible oil, subjected it to chemical violence, and sold it to you as a health food for decades to come. Today, I'll tell you how the heir to this empire of deceit came to California to build a temple of absolute honesty. He invested a fortune to create the perfect sanctuary for his family. But he didn't understand one thing. This perfect house, built to protect them from the world, ultimately cut them off from life itself. Pasadena, California, the noise of the 21st century, the digital chirp of smartphones, laughter, short phrases in a dozen languages. People look at the house, but they don't see it. They see a background, a set piece for their own little fleeting story. It's Doc Brown's house. The name, given to it by cinema, stuck like cheap paint. 1955, invented by Hollywood, turned out to be more real than 1908, when this house was born of wood and ambition. The crowd photographs the facade, low roofs, overhanging like heavy eyelids, exposed beams, like the knuckles of a giant clenching a secret. The house stares back at them with empty windows, patiently enduring this pilgrimage to fiction. It's used to it. It breathes in dust and exhales oblivion. But the moment a camera passes through the invisible boundary, through the hedgerow, the noise of the world recedes. The air grows thicker. The grass here seems greener not from water, but from silence. Here is the front door, a massive portal of teak darkened by time. On it, a stained glass window, a tree whose roots go into the earth and its branches into glass the color of sunset. This is not an invitation to enter. It is a final warning. Beyond this threshold, the laws of the ordinary world no longer apply, and we enter. The first thing that stuns you is the silence, not just the absence of sound. It's a deep, amber silence that has weight. It presses down on your shoulders, forces you to speak in a whisper. The air is still. It doesn't smell like a lived-in home. It smells of wax, polished wood, and resignation. The smells that linger when life has departed. The California sun, fierce and relentless outside, dies in here. It seeps through the wide windows and drowns in the dark wood. The light is not reflected. It is absorbed. Every surface, polished to a satin finish not by a human hand, but by eternity itself, catches it, turning it into a thick resin where decades are trapped. This is not a house. It is a perfect wooden box. But what does it keep? Look at these joints. Not a single nail, not a single metal bracket. Only wood joining wood. Mortises, tenons, dowels. A perfect fit, designed to last 1,000 years. This is not carpentry. It is an obsession, an attempt to create something immune to decay, something honest. But this honesty is a lie. This perfection is not a sign of life. It's a symptom of its absence. There are no scratches from children's games, no worn parquet where the owner paced back and forth, tormented by his thoughts, no faded spots on the wall where a favorite painting once hung. This house has been a flawless artifact from the first day of its existence, a museum that pretended to be a family. It was built as a sanctuary, a fortress of cedar and mahogany, erected to protect one family from the fussy, dirty, industrial world. But a perfect cage, even one made of the most expensive materials, is still a cage. It didn't protect them from the world. It cut them off from life itself. The tourists outside see a ghost from a movie, but we, standing in its heart, feel a different kind of emptiness. The ghost of a grand illusion, the ambition to create an eternal hearth that never learned how to burn. Is this museum house a monument to triumph or a tombstone to tragedy? To understand it, you must listen not to the creak of the floorboards. You must hear the clink of coins that paid for every inch of this perfection. We must return to a place where there was no California sun, to where wealth was born in boiling vats, to the empire built on foam and lies. To understand this house, you must forget the California sun. You must breathe a different air, an air so thick you could chew it. Cincinnati, 1879. Here, the sky wasn't blue. It was the color of soot. It didn't smell of orange groves here. There was a heavy, sweetish smell of boiling animal fat, the original sin on which an empire would be built. Soap, candles, money. The Procter Gamble company wasn't a family business. It was a machine that fed on remains. In enormous steaming vats, a gray, gelatinous mass was boiled, everything that was left of the animals after the butchers took their share. This was the underside of the American dream, sticky and foul-smelling. Ivorydale, a name as pure as the lie it produced. This wasn't just a factory. It was an industrial leviathan, a city built for one purpose, to turn filth into purity. This factory city breathed. In the morning, it inhaled thousands of workers, and in the evening, it exhaled them, tired, covered in soot, smelling of chemicals. It digested raw materials, people, time, and from its bowels came something immaculate, ivory soap, white, pure. Legend has it that it was born from a mistake. A worker forgot to turn off the mixer, and the soap mixture became oversaturated with air. A defect. But when customers started asking for that floating soap, cynical calculation turned the flaw into a miracle. They weren't selling soap. They were selling a myth backed by numbers, derived in the laboratory of the founder's son, the chemist James Gamble. 99 44/100% pure. This phrase wasn't a slogan. It was an incantation. It sounded like a scientific fact, like an indisputable truth. It washed not only bodies, it washed consciences. No one thought of the boiling vats when they held this bar of purity in their hands. But soap was only the beginning. The machine demanded more, and it found it in the waste of another industry, cottonseed oil, a dark, inedible liquid. Procter & Gamble's engineers subjected it to chemical violence, hydrogenation. They forced hydrogen through it at high pressure and temperature, breaking its very nature. And from this industrial torture, something new was born. Crisco, a snow-white, solid fat. They marketed it as a healthy, modern alternative to lard. They released free cookbooks where every recipe specifically called for Crisco. They entered every home not as merchants, but as benefactors, carrying the light of progress on the tip of a knife. This was the alchemy of the 19th century, where the lead of other people's lives was turned into gold for one family, and a dirty truth was washed white by a bar of soap floating in the tub. The empire demanded not only raw materials, but people. Loyal, obedient people. Strikes were a cancerous tumor, eating away at profits. And Procter & Gamble devised a cure, a profit-sharing program. Workers received a share in the company. It seemed like a utopia. But this wasn't generosity. It was a leash. Anyone who joined a union, who dared to strike, lost everything. They didn't buy labor. They bought silence. This is the price of that house in Pasadena. Every perfectly fitted joint was paid for with the sweat of thousands of nameless workers. Every polished plank is saturated with the soot of Cincinnati. Every room filled with silence was bought with the deafening roar of Ivory Dale's machines. A fortune earned through mass production, soulless efficiency, and brilliant deceit was spent on its complete opposite, on the absolute antithesis. And one man, the heir to this empire of foam and lies, came to the California sun not to celebrate. He came to atone, to build in wood what his family had destroyed with fat and steel. He came to create his own honest world. His confession in wood, David Barry Gamble. He bore a name that roared like a working conveyor belt, but he himself was a man of silence. His father, a chemist, commanded the elements on an industrial scale. David himself commanded the numbers in accounting ledgers. He didn't create, he counted. He was the auditor of an empire, the guardian of a fortune born from smoke. And here he was, standing in California, under a sky that had never known the color of soot. Around him, not the roar of factories, but the whisper of orange trees. He had come here not to escape the harsh Cincinnati winters. He had come here to learn how to breathe. He didn't want to build a palace like the Gilded Age upstarts. He didn't need to shout about his money from marble facades. For him, wealth was not a trophy, but a burden. He had seen how it was born, and this original sin of industrialization sat within him like a deep-seated splinter. He didn't need a house. He needed a sanctuary, a place where every object would not lie about its origin, where every nail would be driven honestly, and every plank would tell the story not of a machine, but of the tree from which it was cut. He found the Greene brothers, Charles and Henry. They were not just architects. They were preachers of a new faith, a faith in the honesty of materials, in the sanctity of manual labor. For Gamble, they weren't contractors. They became his confessors. Their meeting was not a business negotiation. It was a confession. Gamble didn't give them blueprints. He spoke of a feeling, of a desire to create a world where his family could live in harmony, not just with nature, but with the very things that surrounded them. A world where nothing was random, nothing mass-produced, nothing fake. The house became his obsession, his silent prayer. He had seen how, in Cincinnati, metal defeated wood, how the soulless machine displaced the hand of the master. Here, in Pasadena, he wanted to turn back time. He wasn't financing construction. He was financing an act of resistance. Every piece of wood, hand-selected by Charles Greene himself, was a form of redemption for him. Here is Burmese teak, hard and noble. It will endure for centuries. It will not rot like the morals of industrialists. Here is Honduran mahogany, its deep color like the frozen blood of the earth. It is nothing like the gray foam in the factory vats. Look at these rafters. They are not hidden beneath the roof. They are exposed like the ribs of an honest, strong beast. Every joint, every groove. This is not a technical solution. This is an ethical statement. We hide nothing. We do not conceal nails under putty and paint. We show how one thing fits into another, how the parts create the whole. This is an architecture without lies. Gamble paid for this honesty. He, a man who knew the value of every cent, let go of the reins. He allowed the architects to design everything, from the building itself to the last light fixture, from the carpet on the floor to the number on the mailbox. Because this world had to be whole, not assembled from parts, but born from a single idea. It was a desperate attempt to create a perfect, authentic reality for his family, with money earned in a world of deception. He wanted to build a paradise on earth, paid for by the hellish labor of others. He wanted to wash away the sin of industry by creating its absolute opposite. There was one thing he didn't understand. Authenticity cannot be designed. Life cannot be bought, even if you can afford to hire the world's best confessors in wood. He wasn't building a house. He was building an altar, and he didn't know that his own family would be sacrificed on it to perfection. 1908. The lot on Westmoreland Place is not a construction site. It's a battlefield. A war is being waged here. A silent, grueling war against imperfection. The commander-in-chief in this war is the architect Charles Greene. He isn't sitting in a headquarters poring over blueprints. He is here, in the dust and wood shavings, his gaze as sharp as a measuring tool. He trusts no one, only his eyes and his hands. A shipment of wood arrives. Cedar. Perfect, straight planks. Any other builder would be thrilled. But Greene paces along the stack like a predator. He isn't looking at the quality. He is peering into the soul of the wood. He reads the grain patterns. This board is too straightforward. In this one, a knot disrupts the harmony. And that third one simply doesn't have the right character. Defective. Take it all away. An entire shipment rejected because of a vague feeling that it wasn't right. The workers, the Hall brothers, look on with a mixture of terror and admiration. They are the best in their field, but they have never worked for such a tyrant. Greene gives them drawings that look more like anatomical atlases. Every connection, every tenon, every mortise is rendered with surgical precision. There are no tolerances here. A deviation of a fraction of an inch is a catastrophe. They are creating joints that will last for eternity. This is not the work of a carpenter. This is the work of a watchmaker, scaled up to the size of a house. They fit giant beams together so that they interlock without a gap, without glue, without a single visible nail. Wood embraces wood in a grip that will only grow tighter with time. Every hammer blow is calculated. Every pass of the plane is a meditation. A mistake means a priceless piece of teak goes to the scrap heap. This is the architect's war with material. He is trying to force nature to submit to perfect geometry. The second front line is financial. David Gamble is in command here. He receives the bills and watches as the budget, which initially seemed reasonable, melts away before his eyes. $50,000. A sum that could have built a dozen houses, but it slips through his fingers like sand. He sees the bill for the rejected shipment of cedar, the bill for hours of work on a single joint that will be hidden inside a wall. He, a man accustomed to efficiency and economy, wages his own quiet war against Charles Greene's perfectionism. Their correspondence is a polite duel. Gamble asks, "Do we really need the most expensive Burmese teak for the terrace beams?" Greene replies, "Only it will provide the right shade and withstand 100 years of California sun without cracking." Gamble is the voice of reason. Greene is the voice of eternity. And eternity always wins because it has already been paid for. This is the client's war with his own ambitions. He wants perfection, but his frugal nature rebels against the price he must pay for it. The third war is the quietest. It's the builder's war against the impossible. They are ordered not just to build. They are ordered to create. They must sand every wooden surface by hand, first with coarse grit, then with progressively finer ones, and finally with just a waxed cloth until the wood begins to glow from within, as if alive. No varnish. Varnish is a lie, hiding the texture. Here, everything had to be real. They work for 10 months. 10 months of dust, sweat, and extreme concentration. They are not building a house of wood and stone. They are building it from taut nerves, from the architect's maniacal perfectionism, and from money flowing like a river from a distant soap empire. Every perfectly rounded edge of a beam represents hours of a human life. Every flawless joint is a suppressed sigh of frustration from previous failed attempts. Every gleaming mahogany panel is the trace of thousands of hand movements, rubbing it with wax. There were no losers in this battle. They won. They created perfection. But when the war is over, a silence falls. And it is this silence that will prove more terrifying than any battle. And so, they entered. The Gamble family crossed the threshold of their paradise. Behind them, the roar of construction. Ahead, the promise of harmony. But instead of relief, a tension hung in the air. The house did not greet them as a home. It greeted them as a museum. From the very first day, the amber light pouring through the windows fell on impeccable floors, polished to a mirror sheen. Every footstep produced a hollow, lonely echo in the hall's perfect acoustics. This was not the sound of life. It was the sound of an invasion, as if they had disturbed the peace of something ancient and important. The children. They didn't run through these corridors. They crept. A child's laugh, clear and carefree, seemed like sacrilege here. It would hit the dark wooden panels and die, finding no response. Any toy left on the floor looked not like the trace of a child's game, but an act of vandalism. This house did not forgive disorder. It demanded worship. The adults spoke in hushed tones. Mary Gamble, the lady of the house, walked through the rooms not as its owner, but as its custodian. She would adjust the perfect folds of the curtains, blow invisible specks of dust from furniture created specifically for this place. The things here were not for them. They were for the things. Dinners in the dining room, a huge mahogany table set impeccably. Light from fixtures designed by the Greenes fell on their faces, making them look like wax figures. The clatter of cutlery against porcelain was the only sound that broke the ritualistic silence. Conversations were rare, cautious, as if the walls, built for protection, were actually listening. They absorbed words, but gave back no warmth. This house was a perfect machine for living, but it could not tolerate life itself. Life is chaos. It's stains, scratches, accidents. Life is imperfection. And here, everything was subject to a total, suffocating order. David Gamble had wanted to build a sanctuary for his family, and he built it. A hermetically sealed capsule that walled them off not from the industrial world, but from each other. Each family member got their own perfect room, their own meticulously designed universe. But these universes did not intersect. The house that was meant to unite became an archipelago of solitudes. And there was another silence, the one they didn't speak of, a tragedy that not even this wooden paradise could heal. The eldest son, James. He did not live in this house. His mind was held captive by an illness that neither money nor the California air could cure. He spent his life within the walls of institutions, far from this temple of the family. The perfect home, built for the well-being of the children, proved powerless against real grief. Its harmony was powerless against the chaos of the human soul. Perhaps the ringing silence in the corridors was an echo of the void his absence had left behind. The family was incomplete, and the house, like a living organism, felt this phantom pain. They lived in a work of art. They slept in it, ate in it, grew old in it. But they could never make it their own. It never became a home. It was and remained an architectural statement, a philosophical treatise in wood. This was not a harbor. It was a perfect, hermetically sealed trap, an amber tomb where life slowly fossilized, never having had the chance to bloom. Death comes quietly. First, in 1923, it takes David Gamble, the man who commissioned this wooden eternity. Then, 6 years later, Mary is gone. The soul leaves the house. Only the shell remains, an impeccable, cold shell. Aunt Julia, Mary's sister, becomes the last priestess of this temple. She lives here, in the thickening silence, keeping faith with the past. She walks the same routes, touches the same things, breathes the same air, saturated with wax and memories. She is a living ghost, guarding the tomb from the intrusion of a new age. And the age is changing. It rushes forward with the roar of engines and jazz trumpets. The world outside the windows is becoming different. Sleek, fast, shiny. The Art Deco era arrives, an era of chrome, glass, and swift lines. Modernism comes into vogue, scorning ornamentation as a crime. And against the backdrop of this new world, the Gamble house begins to age. Not physically. Its teak beams are as strong as ever, its joinery flawless. It is aging morally. What was once the pinnacle of taste now seems cumbersome. What was cozy becomes dark. The carved dragons on the beam ends no longer look elegant. They seem barbaric. The complex handiwork, which the creators were so proud of, is now perceived as excessive, pretentious, old-fashioned. The house turns from a masterpiece into a burden. After Aunt Julia's death in 1943, the house passes to the heirs, to their son Cecil and his wife Louise. They didn't live here. They came for the winter, as if to a country house they had inherited. They look at it with different eyes, not the eyes of a creator, but of a property owner. And they see problems. This enormous wooden monster requires upkeep. It needs to be heated. It needs to be cleaned. The roof, though built to last for centuries, needs repairs. Property taxes in a growing Pasadena are becoming exorbitant. Maintaining the relic of a house is devouring money that could be spent on a new, modern life. The house is silent. It no longer protects. It demands. Like an elderly aristocrat, it has been ruined, but maintains its proud posture and exorbitant appetites. The heirs begin to see it not as a family nest, but as a bad asset. It generates no income. It only generates expenses. And in family conversations, first in whispers, then louder and louder, a terrible, sacrilegious word slips out. Sell. This is the first crack in the masterpiece. It doesn't run through the wood or the stone. It runs through the souls of those for whom it was created. The idea of an eternal family hearth laid in its foundation is failing. The hearth turned out to be too expensive to maintain. The house stands, surrounded by a changing city. Around it, similar old, inconvenient mansions are being demolished, and faceless apartment blocks rise in their place. Practical, profitable. The house watches this with its dark windows. It is a dinosaur in a world of mammals, majestic, but doomed. Its time has passed. It was built to withstand time, but it was not prepared to be betrayed not by the elements, but by its own children. Those who were meant to preserve its soul are now calculating how much they can get for its land. The 1960s. A decade that didn't just change the world, it blew it up. The air smells of rebellion, freedom, and cheap gasoline. California is the epicenter of this earthquake. The old world is collapsing, and on its ruins, a new one is being built, of plastic and optimism. The agony of the Gamble house reaches its peak. It is no longer just old-fashioned. It is an anachronism, a ghost from another universe. And ghosts are not welcome in the new world. They are exorcised. A concrete offer lands on the table of the heirs, Cecil and Louise Gamble. Not from an art connoisseur, not from a historian, from a developer. A man who looks at land and sees not history, but square footage. The offer is simple and brutal, like a bulldozer. Demolish the house, uproot the old trees, pour concrete over everything, and build an apartment complex on the site. Practical, modern, profitable. The numbers in the proposal are persuasive. They promise to lift the burden and bring a solid, real profit. And then, the unthinkable happens. The Gamble family seriously considers it. Picture the scene: a family council. Not in the dark, solemn dining room of the old house, but somewhere in a bright, modern living room. Papers are on the table, a development plan, financial calculations. The voices of reason speak. Father never wanted the house to become a millstone around our necks. The upkeep costs a fortune. The world has changed. We have to be realistic. It's just wood and stone. But money is freedom. It's a future for our children. Every argument is logical. Every point is flawless. This is the language of the new era, the language of efficiency, profit, common sense. And against these loud, confident voices, another one sounds. A quiet whisper. It's not even the voice of conscience. It is the voice of the house itself. It doesn't scream. It is simply present in their memory. The memory of the smell of cedar after the rain, of the way the sun plays on the polished wood, of the weight of the front door. This is the climax, the moment of truth. The family for whom this temple was built, for whom every board was selected with religious reverence, is ready to put it under the knife themselves, ready to sell its soul for $1. David Gamble's ambition to create something eternal for his descendants turns against him. He created something so perfect, so whole, that it proved unviable in the ordinary world. He gave them a masterpiece, and they just needed real estate. This isn't villainy. It's the tragedy of practicality. Betraying the past for the sake of the future is humanity's most common sin. And so they stand on the edge of this abyss. The decision is almost made. The bulldozers are already starting their engines somewhere on the edge of consciousness. The temple, built on soap money, was to be washed away by the wave of progress. The circle was almost complete. The industrial world that David Gamble fled had come to claim his sanctuary, and the keys to the gate were being handed to it by his own heirs. The bulldozers never came. At the last moment, on the very edge of the abyss, something faltered. Whether it was conscience or a belated understanding of what they were about to destroy. The house was saved. But this is not a victory. It is the final, most cruel irony in its history. The family could neither live in it nor sell it. They did the only thing that was left. They gave it up. In 1966, they gave it away. They gifted it to the city of Pasadena and the University of Southern California. The price of the deal, $1, a symbolic payment for a soul they no longer knew what to do with. And so, we are here again, in the same rooms. But everything has changed. Now, there are different sounds here. Not the creak of a rocking chair by the fireplace, but the respectful shuffle of feet on polished parquet. Not the laughter of children, but the muffled voice of a tour guide, monotonously listing wood species and dates. The air no longer smells of home. It smells of lemon polish and sterility. Velvet ropes. They are stretched everywhere, like red veins blocking the house's arteries. They politely say, "Look, but don't touch. Admire, but don't live." The chair, created for David Gamble to sit in, is now exhibit number 42. The bed where Mary slept is part of an installation. The most personal, most private, most intimate space, created as a fortress against the world, has become a public exhibit. It now has visiting hours. You can visit it by buying a ticket. The irony has reached its apex. David Gamble didn't want to build a monument. He wanted to build a hearth. He invested a fortune, earned from mass production, into creating a unique, handcrafted nest meant to shelter his family forever. But David Gamble's ambition failed, grandly, like a collapsed cathedral. He did not create an eternal family hearth. He unwittingly created an immortal artifact. The camera glides through the empty, light-filled rooms. They are as perfect as they were 100 years ago. Even more perfect, because now they are cared for by professionals. But they are dead. Of the life that once flickered here, of David's fears, of Mary's hopes, of the quiet tragedies of their children, nothing remains. Not a scratch, not a faded spot, nothing human, only a perfect wooden shell. It stands, holding its wooden breath, patiently enduring the gazes of thousands of strangers. It has outlived its creator. It has outlived his family. It has outlived an entire era. Stone and wood proved to be stronger than man. But what have they preserved? Only the echo of his great delusion, the belief that a perfect life can be designed, built, and bought. He created a masterpiece that devoured his dream. The ghost that wanders these rooms is not the ghost of a person. It is the ghost of a purpose that was lost. And the House Museum now stands as a majestic tombstone, not over the grave of the Gamble family, but over the grave of the very idea that a paradise on earth can be built with one's own hands. And so the story comes full circle. The wealth, born from industrial deceit, was spent on creating absolute honesty in wood. But this handcrafted temple, this fortress against time, ultimately preserved not the warmth of a family hearth, but only the cold of its own perfection. And looking at its flawless, empty rooms, we are left with a question. What is a true masterpiece? The perfect creation that outlives its creator, or the fragile, imperfect life it was meant for? This debate is eternal, and its continuation is in your thoughts below this video. If stories like this resonate with you, please support our channel.